Are you losing the same weight over and over again? Do you feel like your full-time job is to lose weight or focus on your body? If you've had these thoughts, you are not alone. The What's Eating You podcast is a series of mental health topics that are designed to make you think, learn, educate, and validate. Enjoy the show. Today, I have a very special guest, Bethany Gettis, who is a certified holistic nutritional consultant. And not only has she experienced her own challenges, but she has seen the behind the scenes as a nurse in the dieting industry. So let's give a warm welcome to today's guest, Bethany. Bethany, thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me. So basically my story started, I guess, on a professional level was early 20s. I basically went and worked as a nurse in the diet and health industry, was super excited, I think, because it was about nutrition to start with. What I noticed, I worked there for about 5 years, was that it was perpetual, seeing the same people over and over again. And I think just saying exactly what you said, losing the same weight over and over again was something that I clearly saw. I actually ended up going back to school a couple of years into that and wanted to do holistic nutrition. So I actually ended up graduating, getting my holistic nutrition underway, and opened up my own business basically when my boys were born. So I had a couple of little boys who are now 8 and 9 years old. And I run my business, Nutritious and Delicious.
I love that name so much. So Bethany, tell us a little bit about what is a nurse in the dieting industry? What exactly was your role and what did you do? Because it sounds like what your expectation was and what you actually did or what you saw were different.
Yeah. The reason what drew me in, I think, to a clinic setting was I didn't want to work. I'd done my practicum in the hospitals and I realized I saw so many people that were kind of beyond the health and wellness. And I found that working in a diet industry as a nurse, I felt like it was to start with like preventative health. But as the years went by and I realized people were coming in sort of with more of a black and white thinking mindset in terms of like their own health and dieting, I started to realize there was patterns going on. And I felt like it was actually coming away from like the holistic aspect of actually helping people as people. It was like I was treating robots and it was horrible because it made me feel like they had to fit the diet all the time. And they were treated like a number. And more than anything, I used to actually get in trouble because I spent too much time with my patients one-on-one because I was trying to sort of counsel them and help them through like binge eating and things like that. And they just wanted them in and out. And it was like a bit of a revolving door after a while. And they just wanted their numbers up. So you can tell why the diet industry is $1 billion industry because they just want to push people through out of like a desperation. And I think just realizing like when I did the holistic nutrition, I'm like, there's way more out there to help people than perpetually doing the same thing over and over again and losing the same weight. And a lot of it came down to people's mindsets. Like they were sort of trapped in this diet mentality all the time.
Yeah. And when you say you were in a clinic, was this in a hospital setting? Were people doing a diet program or had they had weight loss surgery?
No. So the majority of people that we actually saw were like kind of your everyday people that had 9-to-5 jobs. A lot of them were executives because it was an expensive diet to be on. So it was more of like a luxury item. Oh. And people would come, like we had like in our city in Canada, we had probably about 5 clinics and I worked at various different clinics myself, but I ended up working at probably the busiest one because I was sort of single and didn't have kids at that time. So I could take on sort of more time and clients and things like that. But it wasn't like a hospital setting or anything like that. They were pretty much like a set way of, hours throughout your day. People could come in and I felt it was almost like this prestige, like when clients were using it, it was almost like it was a name to them. Like, oh, I'm under this like name now that like, it's kind of like a brand. And I think it was almost like bragged about when they went to like parties and stuff like, oh, well, I'm doing this, type of program and stuff. So it was like a set way. Everyone had to follow the exact same thing. And I'm like, but there's like men and women and people that are like shorter, taller. And I'm like, this
Right.
doesn't physically make sense, you know. But also as a nurse, the other aspect of it was that I got to do blood work and understand that. And that's what sort of helped me in my business now, is that I have a lot of medical expertise and stuff like that. So there's different aspects of it, but it was kind of that, like, it opened the door for me, I think.
Yes. And when you're describing this, I'm thinking of almost like a Weight Watchers or a Jenny Craig or a Herbalife.
Similar.
What was
Yeah,
the
it was similar.
program? I'm curious to know, what was the program exactly? What did people need to do?
This was a keto program. So there's a lot of them out there right now. And it's interesting because it was actually made by a doctor. So it is like a medically based, it has to be supervised because the supplements that people were using had to do with like heart rate and things like that. So if you just went on like a regular, went into a regular place, like say if you went into Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig or anything like that, those weren't actually medically supervised. So it kind of made us sort of stand out a little bit that it was medically supervised, because people could write it off under like their benefits or their business. So that's why we had a lot of sort of like executives come in, because they kind of used like their wellness plans. But to say how many people actually followed it properly and actually like got real results was like 10% or less. And
Wow.
that's not, yeah. And that's what sucks about diets in a sense, is that it doesn't teach people lifestyle skills. It teaches people how to follow something.
Yes.
And it actually, a lot of people, I found it actually wrecked their mental health in terms of they felt like they were so restricted all the time. It caused more binge eating than I've ever seen. And it was harsh because people felt like, you know, like they get on the scale, like they do a weigh-in all the time and they'd be up like a couple of pounds and it would just like ruin their whole week. And I'm like, that's water weight.
Yeah.
You know, like it was just detrimental. And I realized people were so focused on just numbers and not that they were, you know, like women, they were on their monthly cycle, or they had gone out to dinner and maybe had probably something that was really high in sodium. Like people were really hard on themselves. Like I could see it all the time. Or a lot of it was they were lying to me about what they were eating. And I was looking at their, you know, their sheets and stuff. And I'm like, that's not true.
Yeah.
You know, so it's hard because then you kind of become this human lie detector test and you kind of have to, you know, like the company almost wanted you just to kind of penalize them, unfortunately.
Wow.
You know, for doing that. So
that's so incredible, because you hear about these programs and it sounds, oh, it's medically based. And I really think having a quote unquote doctor or medical professional involved does give it this illusion of credibility, even if it's not psychologically safe. And it's incredible. You said this attracted CEOs, business people. It was almost like a luxury, like saying, oh, I go to the best gym or I go to this program.
Yeah.
People aren't even adhering to it. It sounds like it was almost a status thing that people were saying, but only 10% were getting results. Were the people actually clinically significantly overweight? Did they have to be a certain size or shape or criteria to join the program, or could anyone do it?
Anyone could do it. We did have quite a lot of what you consider, I guess, on a medical basis, morbidly obese. Morbidly obese clinically is defined as like somebody that has more than 100 pounds to lose. So typically when somebody has more than 100 pounds to lose, they have a lot of excess skin, and they typically are the people that are coming to you after having like maybe like a band procedure done on their stomach or something, or they've tried many different things and they've just continually, you know, had this issue. We used to get referrals from like doctors and stuff where like it was usually they were pushed in sort of by like health complications. So their knees were hurting and they were, you know, on their way to getting knee surgery, and they were told by their doctor they had to lose a significant amount of weight. So I did on a regular basis have a lot of like complex clients. Like a lot of them were diabetic. A lot of them had like binge eating disorders. A lot of them had other problems like thyroid issues or blood pressure issues and high cholesterol, but it all goes hand in hand with being overweight, right? Typically the majority of people, I'd say like probably the biggest numbers were people that had 50 pounds or less to lose was kind of the regular, but the more complex cases, yes, I was kind of given those more often. I think nobody wanted to take them and kind of were like, hey, Bethany, you're up.
Yeah.
So, but it gives you a lot of experience because they usually sort of come in with like a duffel bag of meds and you have to go through like all of their stuff to kind of help them. And they're on a bit of a different protocol. And they're very strictly watched. So again, because it was medically supervised, we were able to take on more challenging patients, basically that had all these health complications, right?
And it sounds like not only did they have health complications, but comorbid psychological issues as well,
Yeah.
binge eating, etc. And with this program, I'm curious to know, how long did it go for and how much would it cost on average?
Ooh.
I know you're in.
It's been so long.
So we can convert it.
Yeah, it's been so long, but in terms of, because that was like 10 years ago for me. So, and the prices obviously would be a lot different now. Canadian, I would say every 3 weeks, they were maybe paying like between $600 to $800.
Wow.
And on top of that, supplements and like bars and things that they would have. So they were, again, like kind of endorsing their own things as well. But yeah, it was pricey, but I found a lot of people, because it was medically based, they were able to write off some of the costs because they were actually seeing a doctor in our clinic and they were seeing nurses. So it was considered this medical thing. That wasn't an aesthetic, like a Herbalife or Weight Watchers, where there wasn't other people kind of other than like wellness coaches or something.
Yeah, got it. So on average, it sounds like it would have been around $1,000 or more a month for these people who are doing the program, even though they could subsidize it in some way. That's still a lot. Only 10% to see a result at the end of the day. And you said you think it was because it was very restrictive. People were lying, binge eating. It was very keto based. What else do you think it was that made these people essentially, I don't like the word fail. I believe programs fail people. But what do you,
I agree.
What do you think it was? Do you think back then we were just in a different world? Or, what do you think people really struggle with?
People are creatures of habit, first of all. So people will always go back to what they know, even if it's not good for them. The biggest gap that I noticed, there was no education, there's no teaching about like, how do you do this for the rest of your life? We had like a maintenance program and things like that we could help people with. And honestly, like the tiniest percentage would take it. Most people are like, yeah, I'm good. I've lost all my weight. Off I go. And then they would go out and then go back to exactly what, because it almost gives you this it's a false sense of like identity. It's like, I'm thin now. Like I've lost like 30 pounds, like, and I'm out in the world and I can go and eat an ice cream or a slice of pizza, but they don't realize those habits start to stack again. And then they're back in the clinic like a year later, and they're actually heavier than when they first began with us. And I'm like, and I saw that over and over again. Yeah. So it's like this false sense of like, oh, like I lost all this weight. Like I have this like amazing metabolism now. And then they go back and you go back to what you know. So the problem was a lot of people thought, I don't need like any kind of coaching. But the people who were sort of coming back in and saying like, I don't get it. Like, I don't know why I'm back at this weight or I'm heavier this time. And a lot of it is like, I used to ask them like, well, what have you been doing? Well, I stopped going to the gym and, I got busy, and people bring excuses, right? I had a baby or whatever. And yeah, I get that when you're having children and things like that, things change, your bodies change, hormones change. Some people hit menopause or they have a life circumstance. But the thing is, people end up going back to what they remember, what they know. And people always gravitate towards like their cravings. Some people are sweet tooth, some people salty tooth. And I used to ask them like, what are you craving? And a lot of them would be like, oh, I just wish I could just have like a slice of pizza right now and ice cream. But that's like all they thought about because they felt so restricted.
Yes.
So you're kind of trapped in this like mind of like, I can't wait to eat this food. Like I'm sick of eating this stuff. So it was a bad mentality because it was like they couldn't wait to sort of get off that boat and go back onto the on the regular boat. Like, well, I can't wait to feel like I can just eat whatever I want again. But they got back into really bad habits. So that's where my business now, Nutritious and Delicious, the reason I picked that name is because I want it to be like healthy for people, but I also want it to taste good and be real food and something that people can sustain. And even when people tell me, like I have clients that say like, oh, I have the occasional glass of wine, and they're kind of waiting for me to say something to them. I'm like, okay, but that's part of it. Like as long, or like they have a chocolate bar or they eat a slice of pizza. It's just, we don't want to have it on like a regular basis where it's like 80% of the time you're eating really badly and then 20% you're doing good. You want to switch it to you're eating really healthy and clean as much as we possibly can. And there's going to be that room for like, yeah, you go for ice cream with your kids or you have a slice of pizza with your partner or something like that, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like it was that real mindset of, I need to do this program, I need to lose the weight, and then that's it. And I think that's the problem. People see weight management or health management as this on and off. It's not a destination. I see it's a decision, and it's an ongoing decision that you do make. So I think that's a really good thing to point out. It doesn't matter. You can be on the best diet, you can pay so much money, but at the end of the day, you yourself, your habits have to fundamentally shift and change. And what I was going to add to that was when people came back and you saw them and they put the weight back on and then some, I'm curious to know what your perspective is on the set point theory. So my belief and understanding is when you restrict what you're eating for a period of time, your body will lose the weight, etc. But then the minute you start eating quote unquote normal again, because you've starved your body, your set point or where your weight likes to comfortably sit at will increase. Is that true, or do you know much about the set point theory?
There's two ways about that. There's the physical aspect and the psychological aspect of it. So before we kind of go into sort of that, this is something I noticed, and this is a psychological part, I guess, is that even when people lost all the weight, say they lost like 50 pounds and they probably did it in like 3 months, and that seems quick, but that the program was so restrictive that you could actually get to that point that quickly. But because in that 3-month period of time, people still identified as the person 3 months ago, not the person now. So when we were talking kind of about, people rebounding and stuff, going back to their weight, a lot of the time is that people still identify as, I feel like that fat girl, or I feel like that fat guy still. And when they've lost that weight, they still identify as that. So they continue their habits based on those thoughts.
Wow.
Right. So it's like the identification hasn't come through yet. And that's also the problem with diets, is they're so fast and people lose weight so quickly because people want instant results. Right. So it's now not like a lifestyle. It's like a quick fix. We've lost all the weight. And now it's like, now I'm in this like body and I'm skinny and I'm scared because like I don't know what to do with myself. And a lot of people, what I noticed is people that especially had a lot of weight to lose, a lot of it came down to like trauma. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy of comfort was one, and protection. Yes. So people put on that protection to keep other people away. So that was something like psychologically I realized. And if you don't work on that, that's why people end up back where they are, because psychologically you still have all these issues going on, right? But you're like identifying as like, this is how I look on the outside, right? And you don't identify with that yet. So there's no connection, right?
Yeah.
Physiologically, yeah. So like actually like your body, so everyone's different body shapes. As women, we know, like there's so many different body shapes out there. Women, I noticed, definitely took a lot longer to lose the weight if they were doing it with their partner. So I got a lot of couples that came in, husbands and wives that came in, and the women were always upset because their partner always lost way faster than them. And we had to keep reminding them, like, you are very different. they're male, you're female, like your physiological body is completely different. And with women, our hormones fluctuate. So we kind of have this like lag, because once we've lost a bit of weight, then it's like, oh, then all of a sudden you're bloating because you're on your period and all this stuff. So you're kind of all over the map. And the men just seem to like lose it, almost like a staircase version. And the women are just like, like I'm trying so hard. And I'm like, I get it. And like, you can't compare yourself to a guy because you guys don't have the same body, right? So the set point in terms of women, there's some skinny ladies out there that still had really big hips, or they were voluptuous in certain areas. And they could still not lose the weight, and they couldn't stay at that weight. So like every person's body is different. And you're right, there is kind of a set point where people naturally sit, right? There's no such thing as being big boned or small bones. Like every person's bones are the same size in a body, but there's definitely like the width of your hips and things like that matter, the width of your back that matters. And somebody that's 120 pounds looks completely different from somebody 120 pounds in a different height.
Yes.
So one could be anorexic and one could be overweight, right? So it's kind of, and I think as women, we kind of sit with this like number. And I noticed that's where a lot of women struggle, was like, I just want to be like this weight. And I'm like, but why? Like you're losing too much, right?
Yes.
So I think sometimes what other people realized was that they're like, I really want, it came in very strong. Like when I asked them, like, what do you want to be at? Usually they would overshoot in like a really low number. Oh, I used to be that in high school. I'm like, okay, it's not unattainable, but do you really want to live and eat and kind of live your lifestyle at that weight? Like, would that be healthy for you now? And then I found when they started to lose weight, they were maybe 10 pounds or 20 pounds shy of that goal. And they're like, I don't want to be that weight. Like I'm already like super skinny. Like I don't want to lose any more. So I'm like, there you go. So that number that you have stuck in your head isn't always like the best set point, I guess.
100%. There's so much you said that just blew my mind then. People lose the weight fast, and it's almost as though their thoughts cannot change that quickly. So even though you lose weight fast and physically you are where you want to be, your thoughts will ultimately, in a way, can self-sabotage you because they haven't made that change. And this is where a lot of people then develop body dysmorphic traits, where they start looking in the mirror and seeing that big girl, even though she's lost so much weight. And I think that's such an important point to make, that your mind needs to change on this journey to sustain that change, because people think when I lose the weight, everything will change. I'll be happy, I'll be confident, but a lot of the time they're not, because throughout that journey, their mind doesn't actually change along with it.
It's the same with money. People think when I have money, when I have this weight, I'm going to be happy, but money solves money problems, weight solves weight problems. So medically, you probably will end up losing the type 2 diabetes, the cholesterol will probably go back to normal, the blood pressure will go down. And we saw that in blood work. Like that was physiologically, all those things changed, right? But when it comes to sort of like your mindset, like you said, you're not kind of there yet. And I think it's too fast for people. And people want instant results, but then their mindset they're not doing anything to help their mindset get there yet, right? And that's what was hugely missing.
That's such a good way to put it. Weight solves weight problems. Money solves money problems. But your weight problem isn't going to solve your psychological problem of binge eating necessarily. So I think that's so important to take away. And the other thing you said, which I completely agree with because it changed my life too, is if you're listening to this and you have a set number, if you think, if only I was 70 kilos or if only I was X amount of pounds. And by the way, when you said 50 pounds earlier, for anyone wondering, that's about 22 kilos in kilograms. Basically, ask yourself why. Why do you want to be 65 kilos? What are you hoping that will bring you? What is it going to bring you that you can't attain now? People say, oh, because then I'll wear jeans. Wear jeans tomorrow. And I think it's better if you want to look at numbers, I think it's so much better to have a range. Give yourself that flexibility. I want to be between 70, 75. I think it's so healthy and nourishing and flexible to have a range that you would like to ideally be around rather than a set number, because your body changes throughout the seasons of your life, perimenopause, menopause, time of the month, pregnancy, all of that. So would you say aiming for a range instead of a number would be more helpful?
It's harder for women, because I think the men they don't mind being a certain weight. But when I talked to the men, it was like, oh, my high school football weight. And I'm like, okay, but the difference is you're eating like a football player right now, but you're now at a desk job. Like, that's the issue that we're having, right? So the activity has gone away. And a lot of it for men is more so, I just want to be active. So that kind of spurs them on, or something medically based they're trying to get away from that's causing pain in their life. Women, it's like going back to sort of like high school, maybe before children or something like that. So a lot of women, it's like, but I want my body back. And it's like you're fighting against sort of like naturally what your body has done for you. And if anything, try and be grateful for like your body has actually given, life to how many humans that you have. And it's an incredible thing. And yes, like I think as women and moms, we have sacrificed our body in order to be able to give somebody else life, like stretch marks and all that good stuff, but
yes,
at the end of the day, your body changes a little bit. And there's a lot of fit moms out there still, and you can still do all that. You can still tone up and everything. But again, like in athletes too, like they would say like, oh, I used to be super athletic and run all these like marathons and things like that. But is that kind of going to help you right now with like being a mom of how many kids and running errands and doing a job, or like being a stay-at-home mom? Like, you kind of have to look at that. And I say for women, almost like a 10-pound range, because women, we fluctuate so much sometimes throughout the month. Men don't fluctuate so much, but women, we do. We're hormonal creatures. Yes. And like I'd say pick your lower and kind of go up 10 pounds, because that's probably naturally where you're going to end up sitting.
Yes. And 10 pounds is about 5 kilos, which is, the range I said as well. And I think you just hit the nail on the head when you said we've all got this past version of ourselves that we glorify. Oh, I want to be back to my high school weight. I want to be back to my pre-baby weight. But when I ask people, how were you back then? Were you happy? No, I was so restricted.
Nope.
I was so moody. I was so stressed. Yeah. So if you're listening to this, let go of that idea or that weight that you're striving. Start a new goal now, or set a new idea for yourself. Stop thinking, I want to go back to that way. I want to go back. You don't want to go back. You want to go forward. So set something that's realistic and achievable, and not holding on to the past. Because I feel if you've got one foot in the past and one foot in the present, you're never going to feel fully satisfied.
Very true.
All right. So just touching on that topic, and we'll go into some, I guess, solutions, mums and bodies after birth, because I imagine this is such a big area, and just this pressure to bounce back, and all these influencers selling their mum program to get your pre-mum body back, etc. What are some things people can do, maybe mentally or physically, or new mums who may be struggling with their body image?
That one's a tough one, because so many things change when you do become a mom. And I think a lot of the time when I do speak to moms, it's a lot more psychological that's happening. It's a feeling of stress that you've never had before, partly resentment as well. And it's not talked about, because there may be resentment towards partners of feeling like they still have a life and you don't. And a lot of moms don't like to talk about that. Their body that they've given up, sort of, they feel like they've given so much, and they're the ones who've kind of gone through the birth and the pregnancy, and depends also how the pregnancy's gone. Some people have an easy time, some people do not, and the birth as well. And I find a lot of women are so hard on themselves with, but I should be feeling this way. And that's sort of what led me into me having postpartum depression too, is that I kind of had this idea of what motherhood would look like. And I didn't focus so much on the weight aspect, but I definitely remember when I first had my first son, I probably didn't take care of myself as much as I should, probably in terms of eating enough to nourish myself, because you're so ultra focused now on something else And a lot of women are in survival mode, and it kind of it's a huge burnout rate of women doing that. So first of all, being a new mom, you're missing sleep, your hormones are way all over the place. And you're kind of expecting yourself at the same time to lose weight and like fit back in clothes. And it sucks because like social media, it portrays like 5% of what people's lives are really like. And people, you know, women look at that and think, oh, like they're doing so well and this and that. But then you actually talk to these moms and they're like, yeah, I was like crying before I got on the camera, or my kids are, you know, screaming and fighting all day, or like I haven't been able to do anything for myself or even have a shower today. So the real truth doesn't come out, and it happens to everyone. Like there's so much fakeness, and I hate it as a society now because women feel so much more pressure to be a certain way, to look a certain way. And honestly, a lot of the times you kind of sometimes have to just step back from social media if it's making you feel worse about yourself.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, is to just check in with how it's making you feel, how certain accounts are, and figure out what you really need. Because sometimes the last thing you need is to go on some massive weight loss transformation journey. Sometimes you just really got to focus on the basics, getting enough sleep, getting enough water, keeping your child alive, for example. Yeah. Well, that's okay. And we are going to go into more about being a new mum and postpartum depression in our next episode. But I guess to sort of wrap this up, Bethany, what do you suggest people who perhaps have gone through diet culture, they've done diets, and they're almost traumatized from counting calories, exercising, doing all that? How can they start to manage their weight or health, or I don't even know how you phrase it, lose weight, even that's triggering for people, in a way that isn't diet culture-y? What's the answer? Because there's so much confusion on this. People say count macros, and other people are like, no, macros is disordered eating. Does it depend on the person?
Yeah, this is, and I usually pick this up on like when I do consultations with people and I start to listen to how they talk or what they've done in the past, it starts to create a pattern in like the conversation. If you are very obsessive about the way you have been with food or in the past, and you're very restrictive, or you go to the opposite side, which is what creates the cycle of binge eating, is restrictive and then eating more food, and it just continues, right? It's making all food a yes, no matter what it is, because that's the number one to start with. Because I think there's so many times you tell yourself, oh, I can't eat that because it's not good for me. And then you get into this habit of like, but I don't want to eat vegetables. Like I want to eat that. So then all your mind is focused on is the things that you can't have. And that's a natural instinct for most people, is that I want what I can't have, right? So if you're constantly telling yourself like, no, I can't eat that, or I shouldn't be eating that, and you're kind of doing that, it's obsessive thinking. And if somebody came across me like that, I probably wouldn't have them focus on calories or macros, because it would just make them worse. I would probably go into more of a longer term plan, more so I think coaching around their mindset, because they have tapes that are going on that are creating these patterns habitually, no matter what program they're doing or diet they're doing. It's the same issue throughout. So the first thing is every food is a yes. So I think starting to make a meal plan for somebody like that is not having anything too restrictive. I would probably find out more so what their cravings are, whether they're salty, sweet, salt or sweet, and gear towards that kind of food, whether it's different fruits and vegetables, and adding treats in, because the more you can add stuff in and say yes, you're kind of like giving up that control, and otherwise like it becomes more anxiety for people, right? So that's where you probably would need to work with somebody one-on-one, if that's kind of where you're at. Because it will happen in the next program or the next thing that you do, right?
I love that idea of every food is a yes food, because when you demonize certain food or put food on a pedestal, then your brain wants it, especially if you say you can't have it. And that's why when people are like, I just can't have that in my house, we're like, no, we need to have that in your house to just neutralize your brain to it, to see it's not this special thing. It's just chocolate.
Yeah.
And tell yourself, I can have this anytime, because when you tell yourself that, you're not going to want it all day, every day.
Yeah. That's where I think when you are on something like that and you can't quit cold turkey, you kind of have to work your way down. So that's where I would start to say to somebody, if they're perpetually like a chocolate eater or chip eater or things like that, and they suffered really with a really bad binge eating disorder, I would start to say, okay, let's just sort of have a look at the amount and let's do that every day. So it's sort of like it neutralizes, like you said, it neutralizes that, like, I can't have it anymore. So you're saying, okay, I can have it every day, but I'm just saying, okay, this is your amount and we're going to baggy it up and then you can have this every day. And you get to the point where you're like, I don't want it anymore.
Yes.
So it almost like loses its status, and like the pedestal thing. It's like you take it off its pedestal.
Exactly. And if you have it every day, you're sort of conditioned to it being there and seeing it there. I think that's such a good tip. Is there any other tips, I guess, for anyone who is maybe wanting to go on a bit of a health or a wellness or a weight loss journey, but is scared of being triggered back into an eating disorder or back into, being really strict? Is there a criteria when you know someone's ready to lose weight versus they still have an eating disorder?
So this is a double-edged sword because what is underlying throughout everything you just said is a psychological issue that's underlying. So whether you start this new fantastic program that guarantees that you'll never have to diet again or anything like that, typically it puts you back in that same mindset again. So a lot of it is, if you are geared towards that way and you are naturally very, I'd say, compulsive or obsessive with it, or feel consumed by it, right? I think that's where you need to work with somebody long-term and have this be like more of a long-term, realize, because of the way you are thinking and maybe the thoughts that are coming out, that it's probably going to be like a 6-month journey for you, I'd say, because to get, like we said at the beginning of the conversation, to get your identity matching with like how you want to look, you want to change your inner identity first to match that person that you want to be. Because then you actually naturally start to change and go, I am actually a healthy person. So you start to make those decisions. And it's like going to the gym, instead of saying like, oh, I have to go to like another gym session, I don't want to go, I want to sleep in, or whatever it is. You're instead telling yourself in a natural way, like, I'm a healthy person, I love working out, right? And it's same with the food. So it's like you want to change the identity underneath first, because that's going to make you long-term lose that weight. And then you actually start to realize like, oh, my clothes are fitting like a lot better. Like I'm not actually obsessing over the food that I used to eat before, because you're changing the underlying issue.
Yes. And I love that you said it's a 6-month journey, and it is. I myself have been through a journey, and the longer you give it and the less pressure you put, I think it will just start to happen, rather than making it this urgent crisis. You've got to change your body and lose weight, because that stress creates cortisol, and that can be a double-edged sword too. So I think you've just highlighted so many really good points. Was there anything else, Bethany, on the topic you wanted to speak about today before we wrap it up?
You just said it yourself. There's a desperation there, right? So that feeling of like, I need to lose weight. I need to lose 10 pounds or 20 pounds. Like I'm going on vacation, and there's that, like, this little time to do it. And all of a sudden I have all this stuff I have to lose. So you're in a place of desperation. That's why diets draw those people in. So just be aware of that, right? So in terms of sort of looking at, you want to actually be a certain weight or a healthy person, I would start to say, look at like the longevity of like, do you want to be like this next year? Like if you're not feeling happy with where you are, you got to start somewhere, right? But I don't think coming from an urgent place, that's a dangerous place to come from.
Yes, I agree 100%. And for me, and I talk about this in another episode, where it was, I forced myself to date when I felt my ugliest and heaviest, because I accepted and I found a way to love myself at my worst, rather than come from this place of desperation. I shouldn't say my worst. I should probably say my most challenging, rather than come from a place of desperation. And I can't accept myself like this. I was like, no, this is me, and I can be happy, and I deserve to do the things that I would do if my body was different. And I think enjoying the journey is really part of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a journey.
It is such
it might be a lifelong journey for some people.
Yeah, 100%. So, Bethany, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. You obviously have so much knowledge, and I love that you incorporate, the blood work, and you have that medical background as well. Where can people find you? Is there anything you want to plug, or your socials?
Yeah, everything basically is on my website. So it's www.Ndelish.com. We do family meal plans, we do individual meal plans. And if you are somebody that you've listened to this and you can hear that maybe you do have some binge eating, things like that, I would suggest probably do some coaching, because that would really help you, I think, long term.
It's great that you can tap into both of those aspects, and you work with families and parents as well, which I think is incredible. And we'll put the links in the show notes as well. But Bethany, thank you so much for coming on today's episode. I cannot wait to talk with you in the next one.
Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Thank you.